Hey YouTubers, welcome to the Cyber Overwatch channel. I am Pragmatic One. In this video, I will discuss vulnerability triage and why it is a fundamental step for a vulnerability management program to be effective. I will also discuss why it is critical for organizations to prioritize and address security vulnerabilities based on risk and impact. I will provide a detailed breakdown of vulnerability triage covering its phases, TTPs, best practices, and key factors that help to enhance an organization's security posture. If you find this content informative and you are interested in cybersecurity, please like and subscribe to the Cyber Overwatch channel. Also, for more free content, please regularly check back on www.cybersec.com. Vulnerability triage is a fundamental step in an effective vulnerability management program, ensuring that organizations prioritize and address security vulnerabilities based on risk and impact. Given the high volume of vulnerabilities identified daily, security teams must systematically assess, categorize, and prioritize them to allocate resources efficiently and mitigate potential threats effectively. Vulnerability triage is the process of assessing, categorizing, and prioritizing security vulnerabilities based on their potential risk and impact on an organization. The goal of vulnerability triage is to understand the vulnerability finding in order to prioritize and remediate the most critical risks to an organization. It ensures that the security team focuses on addressing the most critical vulnerabilities first, thereby optimizing resources and minimizing risk exposure. The types of vulnerability triage. The objective of vulnerability triage is to determine the appropriate response to identified vulnerabilities. The depths of analysis can range from simple assessment of exposure to a comprehensive risk evaluation and prioritization. In most cases, a threat and vulnerability team will perform basic exposure assessments and preliminary risk identification assessment. The risk management team will likely perform the latter three triage types. The following outlines how comprehensive vulnerability triage can be. Basic exposure assessment. A basic exposure assessment aims to identify and evaluate potential vulnerabilities within an organization's environment, providing a high-level overview of security exposures. This assessment focuses on determining whether unpatched vulnerabilities or missing compensating controls affect critical systems. It is a rapid initial evaluation designed to highlight the most apparent security gaps, filtering out irrelevant vulnerabilities to streamline remediation efforts. By focusing on immediate exposure, this assessment helps security teams quickly identify areas that require further analysis or urgent mitigation. In general, this assessment type is only focused on immediate exposure, providing surface-level identification of vulnerabilities. The assessment does not require a lot of time, and fixes are usually available. Preliminary risk identification. Building upon a basic exposure assessment, a preliminary risk identification assessment takes a more comprehensive approach by evaluating not only vulnerability exposure, but also the associated risks and their potential impact on the organization. This process involves determining whether a vulnerability meets predefined criteria that could elevate it to a high or critical risk, allowing security teams to prioritize threats effectively. To achieve this, analysts conduct a rapid review of vulnerability metadata, including CVSS score, severity rating, exploitability, and affected assets. Unlike a basic exposure assessment, which focuses primarily on detected vulnerabilities and asset exposure, preliminary risk identification provides a broader risk context, helping organizations make a more informed security decision. In general, this assessment type has a broader scope for identification of risks, but analysis is very surface level. The assessment offers a quick initial review to identify high-level risks, allowing for prioritization for further analysis. Partial risk analysis. In partial risk analysis, the analysis goes beyond vulnerability metadata and basic severity ratings to assess potential impact to an organization. While not a full risk determination, the assessment involves evaluating factors like asset criticality, exploit availability, and potential attack vectors. The security team conducts a focused evaluation of a specific risk category, such as cloud infrastructure, rather than assessing the organization's entire threat landscape. This targeted approach provides a detailed understanding of the potential impact of vulnerabilities within the selected scope without requiring a full-scale risk determination. By honing in on a particular area, security teams can prioritize critical threats and determine whether further investigation is needed. Comprehensive risk analysis. At this stage, a full risk analysis is conducted, providing a detailed evaluation of vulnerabilities and their potential impact on the organization. This assessment considers key factors such as exploitability, business impact, compensating controls, and network exposure to determine overall risk level. Security teams utilize attack mapping techniques, aligning vulnerabilities with threat actor tactics and techniques using frameworks like MITRE ATT&CK. This approach helps assess both the likelihood of exploitation and the potential consequences, enabling organizations to develop proactive mitigation strategies and strengthen their overall security posture. Risk analysis and prioritization. The most in-depth triage type includes a complete risk assessment along with prioritization that entails a majority of the tasks from other triage types. Teams not only understand the vulnerability's potential impact, but also determine how it should be addressed relative to other findings. Prioritization considers remediation timelines, resource availability, and organizational risk tolerance. Factors influencing prioritization include threat actor activity, patch availability, and system criticality. By applying these levels of triage, organizations can allocate security resources efficiently, ensure that most impactful vulnerabilities are addressed first. Phases of triage. A structured approach to vulnerability triage ensures organizations can effectively assess, prioritize, and mitigate security risks. This process consists of several critical steps from asset inventory management to post-triage remediation, each contributing to a more resilient security posture. Let's cover the phases. Number 1, asset inventory management. Before vulnerabilities can be assessed, it is essential to establish and maintain a comprehensive asset inventory. This ensures visibility into all organizational systems, software, and network components, allowing teams to accurately assess potential risks and their impacts on critical assets. I provided examples on this slide. Number 2, vulnerability data and threat intelligence ingestion. Organizations must collect vulnerability data from multiple sources, including automated scanners, external threat intelligence feeds, and security advisories. This step ensures security teams have the most up-to-date information on emerging threats and vulnerabilities. Number 3, vulnerability data and asset inventory correlation. Once vulnerabilities are identified, they must be mapped to the organization's asset inventory. This step helps determine which systems are affected, allowing for more precise risk assessments and prioritization. Number 4, risk analysis using metadata. By leveraging metadata from vulnerability and asset sources, security teams can perform an in-depth risk analysis. This includes evaluating CVSS scores, exploitability, business impact, and existing security controls. Using frameworks like EPSS and MITRE ATT&CK enhances the risk evaluation process. Key risk factors to evaluate include vulnerability disclosure date, vulnerability dwell time, patch publish date, impact on business critical systems, impact on sensitive data, system type, scope of impact, network exposure, and mitigating controls. Number 5, findings prioritization based on risk. Not all vulnerabilities pose the same level of risk. Prioritization is based on multiple factors including severity, exploitability, asset criticality, and whether active exploitation is occurring. This risk-based approach ensures that high-impact vulnerabilities are addressed first, optimizing remediation efforts. Additional consideration when prioritizing findings include patch effort complexity, availability of fixes or mitigations, and remediation efficiency. Number 6, treatment and remediation. After prioritization, organizations must determine the appropriate course of action, patching, reconfigurations, compensating controls, or continuous monitoring. Security teams should provide guidance to operations teams on following defined SLAs for remediation timelines and validate fixes. Assistance can be provided through rescanning and penetration testing. Post-remediation validation ensures vulnerabilities are effectively mitigated, reducing the risk of exploitation. By following these structured steps, organizations can streamline their vulnerability management process, focusing resources on the most critical security threats while improving overall resilience against cyber attacks. The vulnerability triage process involves a structured set of steps to ensure that security teams can efficiently identify, assess, and mitigate vulnerabilities based on risk and impact. Each phase contributes to a comprehensive approach that aligns with organizational security objectives and resource constraints. Methods, tactics, techniques, and procedures. Understanding the methods, tactics, techniques, and procedures associated with vulnerability triage helps security teams effectively assess and mitigate risks. TTPs provide a structured way to analyze vulnerabilities, assess exploitability, and implement appropriate remediation strategies. By leveraging these approaches, organizations can strengthen their defenses, minimize security misconfigurations, and proactively address emerging threats. Methods. Methods involve various approaches to identifying and assessing vulnerabilities. Automated scanning tools help security teams regularly detect vulnerabilities, while threat intelligence correlation ensures that identified threats align with real-world exploits. Some of these methods include continuous vulnerability scanning, risk-based prioritization, patch management, attack surface reduction, threat intelligence integration, red teaming and penetration testing, configuration and compliance management, and automated remediation and orchestration. Tactics. Tactics in vulnerability management focuses on the overarching strategies used to detect, prioritize, and mitigate risks across an organization's infrastructure. These high-level approaches encompasses asset discovery, risk assessment, remediation, verification, and continuous monitoring. Techniques and procedures within vulnerability management provides actionable steps necessary to implement strategic tactics effectively. These include automated scanning, risk assessment models, patch deployment, virtual patching, and security validation processes. By incorporating well-defined procedures, organizations can streamline their vulnerability management workflow, reducing downtime and enhancing overall security resilience. Some examples include discovery and asset inventory, which can involve passive and active scanning, endpoint agent-based scanning, cloud and container scanning, and shadow IT identification. Risk assessment and prioritization, which involves evaluating risk based on CVSS and EPSS, mapping vulnerabilities using MITRE attack framework, and mapping risk based on business context. Remediation and mitigation involves informing and providing guidance to operations teams when it comes to patching, configuration changes, and applying compensating controls. Verification and validation involves rescanning assets after remediation for verification and conducting security assessments. Monitoring and continuous improvement involves monitoring the vulnerability platform database for changes in vulnerability status, proactively mapping vulnerabilities currently present in the environment to threat actors, tactics, and techniques, developing patching schedules and deploying mitigation measures, evaluating assets security posture using compliance frameworks like CIS benchmarks. Key factors in vulnerability triage. Effective vulnerability triage requires evaluating multiple factors to determine the severity and priority of security risks. When conducting vulnerability triage, security teams must consider aspects such as disclosure date, the duration a vulnerability has remained undetected, and whether a patch is available. Also assess the potential impact on business-critical systems and sensitive data to help prioritize remediation efforts. Evaluating the type of affected system and the overall scope of impact can further influence decision-making, ensuring that vulnerabilities posing the greatest risk to an organization's security and operations are addressed first. When conducting vulnerability triage, several critical factors should be evaluated to determine risk and prioritization. These include vulnerability disclosure date, vulnerability dwell time, patch availability date, impact on business critical systems, impact on sensitive data, system type, scope of impact, network exposure, mitigating controls, CVSS-based score, and CVSS temporal score. By evaluating these factors, organizations can make informed decisions on how to prioritize and remediate vulnerabilities efficiently. Best practices for effective vulnerability triage. To manage vulnerabilities efficiently, organizations must adopt best practices that enhance risk assessment, prioritization, and remediation. A risk-based approach ensures that vulnerabilities are addressed based on their actual impact rather than relying solely on CVSS scores. Incorporating threat intelligence helps security teams focus on actively exploited weaknesses, while automation streamlines scanning and mitigation efforts. Clear service-level agreements, SLAs, ensures timely remediation, and cross-team collaboration improves patching effectiveness. Continuous monitoring, integration with SIM and SOAR platforms, and the use of AI-driven analytics further strengthens an organization's ability to detect, assess, and respond to emerging threats proactively. In conclusion, vulnerability triage is a critical aspect of an organization's cybersecurity strategy. By implementing a structured approach to identifying, assessing, and prioritizing vulnerabilities, organizations can significantly reduce their attack surface and enhance overall security resilience. By following best practices, leveraging automation, and continuously refining processes, security teams can stay ahead of emerging threats and effectively manage vulnerabilities in an ever-evolving digital landscape. Thank you for tuning into this video, Vulnerability Triage, a comprehensive guide. Thank you for also checking out the Cyber Overwatch channel. If you find this content informative and you are interested in cybersecurity, please like and subscribe to the Cyber Overwatch channel. For more free content, check out the www.cybersec.com website found in the description. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave a question in the comments, or you can send me a message from the CyberSec website listed in the description. Until next time, keep learning. The only way to improve is to keep learning. Pragmatic One, signing off.